Working. There we go. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all. I want to welcome you to the 2023 Foundation Lectures. My name is John Wasson. I'm the associate pastor here at Covenant for discipleship. If you're a Covenant member, or you were a visitor, if you're a friend of someone, or if you know Dave somehow, welcome. We're so glad you're here, and you found your way here tonight. The Foundation Lectures grew out of a desire from our discipleship committee to bring Christian authors and speakers to campus so that we could kind of dig deeper over an extended period of time into issues of faith together. And we are very grateful for the support of Covenant's Foundation in this endeavor. And as Laura Tuma, who is the chair of our discipleship committee, said a few years ago, we named these lectures, the Foundation Lectures, both out of respect and honor for our foundation, but also to reflect the desire that we had for this weekend to really explore foundational issues of our faith, and those issues that apply to us regardless of the circumstances of our lives or how long we have been following Jesus. So it's with a firm foundation that we think that we grow and we mature and we flourish, both as individual Christ followers as well as a church. And so because none of this would be possible without the support of the foundation, I want to invite Cheryl Brown to to come. She is a trustee of our foundation, to just tell us a little bit about what the foundation is and what it does. So, Cheryl.
Thank you. Well, welcome. I am a trustee on the foundation, and some of you may not be familiar with the Covenant Foundation, but it was created in 1998 after a longtime Covenant member passed and created a $1 million bequest that created the foundation, and the member wanted to make sure that the foundation would benefit the church and create a long-time source of financial support that would endure and support the foundation and the church for many generations. Over time, additional donations, both directly and from bequests and also given in memory of Covenant members, have been made. And currently the foundation is $1.5 million. Funds are managed for long-term growth to ensure that they'll continue. And $1.3 million during that time has actually been spent for the benefit of the church. Some examples of how the money has been spent: in 2006, 2011, and 2014, the foundation helped retire church debt. There was a purchase for office equipment for the New Covenant Fellowship. It's also provided pastoral housing funds to help offset Austin's high cost of living when we bring on new staff. And it's purchased the sanctuary Bibles that are in front of you in the sanctuary right now. There's also the foundation has the goal of educating members about a theologically sound approach to estate planning and end-of-life issues and other money matters, and that started in 2015. And the speaker series began in 2020. It was approved for 10 years. There wasn't one in 2021. You probably can guess why. And then we had our wonderful speaker, two speakers last year. And so this is the third meeting for the Foundation Speaking Series. And so welcome. I hope you enjoy this weekend's discussion, and please come see me or any of the other trustees if you have questions about the Covenant Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Well, I'm very excited to welcome Dave Zoll to be our 2023 Foundation Lecturer. Dave is the founder and director of Mockingbird Ministries, which is a ministry that seeks to connect the Christian faith with the realities of everyday life in fresh and down-to-earth ways, they say, and I think they accomplished that goal, through publications, through conferences, and through online resources. Their website is fantastic, great content, articles, podcasts. One of the publications is that they put out, that they print, is a beautifully printed magazine that I think is it published quarterly? About quarterly. And we actually have one of their recent issues here this weekend, and we're just giving it away to everybody. So pick one of those up on the way out. Catherine, are they going to be in the narthex on the way out? Great. By the way, thank you, Catherine Sedberry, for all your work. I'm so sorry to embarrass you like that, but I'm not, you're right. I should have said we wouldn't be here without the foundation or Catherine Sedberry. Dave also serves as editor-in-chief of the Mockingbird blog and co-host of the Mockingcast podcast. Maybe you've listened to that podcast. He wrote the critically acclaimed book Seculosity, How Career, Parenting, Technology, Food, Politics, and Romance became our new religion and what to do about it. And I think we've got copies of Seculosity for sale this weekend as well. Highly recommend that. And he's written for Christianity Today, the Washington Post, as well as The Guardian. Dave lives with his wife and 3 boys in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he also serves on the staff of Christ Episcopal Church. And if that's not all impressive enough, Dave also makes some of the best playlists on the internet, including one to accompany the book Low Anthropology. So if you have Spotify, you can subscribe to that playlist, and there's just all different ways for you to get Low Anthropology through this Lent. We'll put a link on our website, on the Foundation Lecture website, so that you can get that. Dave is going to be sharing from his new book, Low Anthropology, this weekend, both tonight and tomorrow. He'll also be preaching in our services on Sunday morning as well. Tonight he's going to give a talk for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have some time to engage with him with some questions after that. And then tomorrow morning from 9 to noon, we're going to meet over in FEB 200 where we were tonight. We're going to be in there the whole morning. There will be some breakfast tacos, some pastries, some very good coffee, so please come hungry tomorrow. And Dave will give a talk in the morning, and we'll have some time to have conversation with each other around some of the issues, and then following up with an extended debrief and Q&A as well. So that's the plan for the weekend, and I think it's going to be really good. I'm really glad to see you all here tonight. I believe that God has called us here tonight. I believe God has called you here tonight, and I'm grateful for that. I hope that you are inspired in some way by the grace of God this weekend. So pray with me now, and then we're going to sing a hymn, and then we will welcome Dave. Holy and gracious God, we give you thanks for the ability to be here this weekend, for the generosity of our foundation, and for Dave, who accepted our invitation to be our teacher. Would you be gracious to us as we listen and as we learn about your call to us in this time and place? Would it enrich our faith for this Lenten journey? Would you deepen our understanding of the gospel? Would you broaden our thinking? Would you transform our lives somehow, that we might be your faithful servants as we leave here? We ask all this in the name of Jesus, our Savior. Amen.
For those who are able, let's stand together and sing, Be Thou My Vision. Be Thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that Thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true word, I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. High King of heaven, my victory won, may I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
Okay, it's on. Well, thank you. Thank you for that very warm introduction. It's a thrill to be here. I've just gotten the sense that the entire country is just packing up and moving to Austin. And so just count me as one of those people. It's really cool to be here. And any airport that has live music playing when you arrive feels like a place that you want to be. So anyway, I'm very glad to be here. I'm excited to get to know some of you this weekend, and again, touched to be invited to these foundation lectures. I've heard lots of, maybe you don't know this, but Covenant has a really great reputation out there. And so people ask me what I'm doing in Austin. I say, I'm going to Covenant Presbyterian. And I'd never heard of you guys, so they apparently have. So I'm so happy to be here. And thank you, John. Thank you, Tom, for welcoming me so warmly. And so we're going to talk about low anthropology. This is my book, that the unlikely key to a gracious view of others and yourself. And I'm going to explain the cover to you before we get into the material, because I think it might help frame this a little bit. Have you ever tried doing this trick? You ever tried it? You can find YouTube, like videos on TikTok and Instagram right now of like a Lamborghini with a tablecloth tied to it with like a cable, and you watch the Lamborghini go from 0 to 100, and then it whips the tablecloth in the middle of the street. You kind of have to watch it to know what I'm talking about. But nothing moves at all. And if you do this move correctly, everything stays on the table. What we have on the low anthropology cover is someone not doing it correctly. All right? So there's a magician, and he looks very serious, but the truth is that he's just sent everything flying. And this book is supposed to be actually about revealing what's really going on in us, in me, in you, in us as human beings. But it's meant to do it in a playful way where hopefully some things go flying, hopefully some apple carts get upturned, but there's a sense of whimsy to it. And it's not meant to be threatening. The colors and the slanted text, which feel sort of movie poster, comic booky, that's intentional. There is a apple with a bite, going, the Bible. I am a Christian. And there's a donut, but there's one thing that is still on the table. What is that? It's a lily. Now, I don't actually know if Presbyterians have Easter lilies, but Episcopalians are crazy about them. And so, you walk in on Easter Sunday, you can't breathe because of all the pollen. But this book is about revealing in a playful way what's really going on, sending some things flying, but hopefully leaving something important on the table. And that Easter lily is a nod, an explicit nod to not only to God, but to Jesus and our risen Savior. So that's what's going on there. I did think it was important that this is not a book about perfection or perfectionism or becoming a better person or becoming even capable of doing this trick correctly. I wanted to invite you into this in your own, shall we say, scrappiness and inability to maybe pull it off all the time, but to do it playfully. Does that make sense? All right. I know it's a hard sell. When you both have a title that no one understands and a cover that looks cool but no one really gets, you're not making it easy for yourself. So I'm going to back up, though, we're going to back into the content of this book. And to do so, the book came out in September, and immediately after it came out, or about a month afterwards, there was a podcast episode that my wife sent to me. It was Maya Shankar is a neuroscientist, a cognitive behavioral scientist, and she has a podcast called A Slight Change of Plans, and she interviewed a guy named Daniel Pink. Do you know Daniel Pink? He's kind of a thought leader, researcher, public intellectual type, and he wrote a book called The Power of Regret. The Power of Regret. And in order to write this book, he undertook the largest survey of regret that's ever been done. He surveyed 22,000 people, mostly Americans, about their regrets in life. Now, here you go. This is my favorite regret meme. It's a stormtrooper saying, "Those were the droids I was looking for." So what he found is that 81% of those 22,000 people responded saying that they did have regrets about their life. Now, regret is not just something you wish had gone differently. It's something that you wish you had done differently, a different choice you wish you had made, something you didn't pursue, a business you didn't start, a job you didn't quit, a romantic interest you didn't persist with. I don't know what it is, but he said 81% of people said that they did have serious regrets in their life. And then I think 18% of people said they didn't, and then went on to list all of the regrets they had about their life. The idea being 1% of people, I guess, are just sociopaths. The idea is that everyone has some regrets. He found that there was something universal about the experience of regret. Now, he broke them down into different types of regrets. There's foundational regrets, wish I'd saved more money, wish I'd eaten better. There are boldness regrets, I wish I'd taken that risk. There are moral regrets, like I wish I hadn't bullied someone on the playground when I was a kid. I wish I hadn't, taken that money that wasn't mine. And then there are connection regrets. Now, connection regrets, that's sort of, I wish I'd spent more time with my grandmother before she passed. Connection regrets were the most common. Moral regrets were the ones that hung on the longest. So you'd have people, 85, talking about something that happened when they were 12, that they still regret. They're in the hospital, and they want to tell you about this thing that they did. Now, lest you think I fall outside of this, I'm part of that 1% of non-regretful people. One of the moral regrets that they talk about most poignantly is bullying. And if you're raising children today, you know that anti-bullying is a very important thing in the age of the internet. I bullied my younger brother mercilessly, and I'm not saying that as a joke. It was terrible. I didn't bully anyone at school. I had good friends. I was nice to my teachers, but I took it out. I took my adolescence out on my younger brother, and I made sure he knew how incapable he was, and how young he was, and just how essentially insignificant he was. And he wrote his college essay about it. Right? He wrote his college essay about it. And he got into Harvard. So I don't know if I regret that. Should I regret that? I gave him a golden ticket there, maybe. He should be thanking me. Anyways, it's a very interesting book, but the reason I mention it is that Maya asks Daniel Pink during this interview, after he's told her all about the different types of regrets. Oh, by the way, one other interesting finding is that when people are in their 20s, they regret actions and inactions in equal measure. By the time they're in their 40s, which one wins out? Inaction, by like 8 to 1. 8 to 1, just, put that in your back pocket. You're welcome. She asks him, she says, you've spent 3 or 4 years researching this book and really marinating in the regrets of the country, of the West. And, some of these things are like, I bullied my little brother. Some of them are much, much worse. And she said, are you doing okay? How are you doing? Are you all right? This is heavy. Are you depressed? And he said, you'd think so. But the exact opposite is true. I've never felt more connected to my fellow human beings than I do right now. I've never felt more sympathy for those that I disagree with than I do right now. Once he realized that everyone had regrets just like he does, somehow that opened up an avenue for compassion and unity and kind of love. So hold that thought, and actually don't go to the next slide yet. But hold that thought, because I want to think about that as we think about this. To write this book, I rely on cartoons for just about everything, but I relied on one cartoon in particular to write this book, and it's a cartoon of a crowded city street. I describe it in the introduction of the book, and it's people going, it's men and women and old and young, and everyone's going in different directions, and no one's talking to each other. They all look kind of stressed out. And they have thought bubbles going up to the sky, and they're all thinking the exact same thing. Now, what do you think they're thinking? Everybody else seems to be doing great. Ding, ding, ding. Someone when I said this at the very first time I gave this version of this talk in Nashville, someone in the back shouted like the caption has got to be WTF. But let's look at it. This is what it says. All these people really seem to have it together, and I still have no idea what's going on. This appears to be, in the context, in this cartoon, it's a universal sentiment. Now we've got a sort of a nifty name for this kind of feeling today. Do you know what that name is? A label for it? What's the label we hear? Imposter syndrome. You heard about imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is that the idea that I've pulled one over on the public. And if you really knew what I was like, you would not allow me to continue to be here. If you really knew, like, it's become so ubiquitous. Drew Barrymore used it on her talk show the other day. You see it everywhere. The New Yorker last week ran a long piece called Why Everyone Feels Like They're Faking It. And they looked into the origins of imposter syndrome, and it was never meant to be called a syndrome. This was pioneered by two female academics, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. And they were writing in the 70s. And it was basically a phenomenon that they discovered among high-achieving professional women who felt like they didn't belong in the whatever rooms that they'd ascended to. And so they called it imposter phenomenon, not imposter syndrome. And they were completely blown away by how many women talked about having this feeling. And then as the years go by, though, more and more people start talking about imposter syndrome, and all of a sudden the male voices start emerging, and you start to say, wait a second, I feel like an imposter all the time. And then you have sort of old and young, and everyone, it turns out, has this experience occasionally of feeling like they're the only one hanging on, the only one making it up as they go along. Maya Angelou once said, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out. Neil Gaiman, famous author, sort of fantasy author, in a commencement address that went viral, described his fear of being busted by the, quote, fraud police, whom he imagined showing up at his door with a clipboard to tell him he had no right to live the life he was living. It's very interesting. And Jameson, in this article, she does mention that there are some women who felt so underestimated that they never felt like they were a fraud. They felt like that people underestimated them, and that's a sort of a slightly different experience of life. But what she found out was that calling it a syndrome is a misnomer. It really is a phenomenon. This is what she wrote. She said, the imposter phenomenon functions as an emotional filing cabinet, organizing a variety of fraught feelings that we can experience as we try to reconcile three aspects of our personhood. 1, how we experience ourselves. 2, how we present ourselves to the world. And 3, how the world reflects that self back to us. There's always some dissonance in that. There's always a gap between who you present yourself to be and who you feel yourself to be. She says this, the phenomenon names an unspoken, ongoing crisis arising from the gaps between these various versions of the self and designates not a syndrome, but an inescapable part of being alive. Now, when Jameson was deciding to do this article, she put out on Twitter she asked for people's responses about if they ever felt like an imposter. And she was, even though she knew it was a popular thing, she was not ready for the outpouring of testimonies that people wanted to share with her. One young woman said, "Can I write you 180,000 words? Because this is my entire life." And it comes to, when you hear that Maya Angelou felt this way, when you hear that Neil Gaiman feels this way, I don't have the experience of judging them. Do you? I actually want to read them more when I hear that. I don't want to read them less. And this is the strange thing that's just happened with both of these examples of a human race that is united in its regret and in its confusion or its feelings of impostorship. We are not united in the directions we're headed. We're not united in our sort of ideology, but we are united by the fact that we all feel phony. This is fascinating, and it is a doorway not into judgment, but into sympathy and connection. This is my doorway into low anthropology. So what do I mean by low anthropology? Well, we all go through life with powerful but unspoken ideas about what human beings are like. For example, we believe that people can always change, or that some people can never change, or that those people will never change, or that man will never change. I don't know what it is. Maybe we believe that pressure produces results, or that pressure produces paralysis. You talk to teachers, figure out what they think. But what are the principles that govern our behavior? What would you say human beings are good at and not so good at? What is the upward limit of our capabilities? What is the downward basement of our liabilities? This is your anthropology. Cultural anthropology is probably what you heard about in college. When there was anthropology classes, those were people studying how humans make cultures. And so you find cultural anthropologists, they study reindeer hunters in the taiga, and they figure out what are the norms and how do they relate to each other. Theologians and philosophers use the word anthropology simply as a shorthand for your operating view of human nature. So whether we realize it or not, our personal anthropology funds expectations in our relationships, in our jobs, in our marriages, in our politics, and very much in our spiritual religious lives. Its bearing on our worldview and therefore our happiness cannot be overstated. Some anthropologies lead to serious disappointment, anger, and cynicism. Other anthropologies can be energizing and life-giving. What they cannot be is non-existent. Everybody has an anthropology. Let's go to the next slide. I love this. This is Calvin and Hobbes. Maybe you read that Bill Watterson has finally announced a new book. It's coming out in October. The guy who wrote Calvin and Hobbes and then retired in 1995. This is Calvin's parents in bed. Are you still awake too? I was thinking. It's funny, when I was a kid, I thought grown-ups never worried about anything. I trusted my parents to take care of everything, and it never occurred to me that they might not know how. That's an anthropology. I figured that once you grew up, you automatically knew what to do in any given scenario. I don't think I'd have been in such a hurry to reach adulthood if I'd known the whole thing was going to be ad-libbed. Brilliant, right? Seeing people as they truly are, as opposed to how we would have them be, is a crucial ingredient in generating authentic compassion and lasting love. That's what the contention of this book is. An accurate anthropology opens us up to all sorts of unexpected vistas of hope. And what we need more than anything is a little more hope, wouldn't you say? So for the sake of my book, I chart anthropologies on, you guessed it, a continuum of high to low. Think of it as like a barometer of human potential. On the high end, you find the sunnier estimations of what men and women are like. You run into sort of grander visions of human enterprise. The higher you get, the more optimistic the assumptions. Graduation speeches may be ground zero for the proliferation of anthropologies, right? This first one, let's go to the next slide. There we go. Who is that? Steve Jobs, looking like Moses, handing down the 2 tablets. Steve Jobs gave a very famous speech, a graduation speech in 2005 to Stanford graduates. And it's so funny, I was out in the West Coast talking about this book, and I had someone in the audience who graduated from Stanford in 2005. And she said, you've seen the video, and it looks like we're all just 100% with Steve and worshiping at his feet. And the truth is, it was 105 degrees in Palo Alto, and we were dying to get to the refreshment table. And it was sort of like, okay, come on, sort of thing. So you never know what's actually going on in life. That's part of a low anthropology. But this is what he told those graduates. He said, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow know what you truly want to become. Sounds inspiring, right? Sort of thing you'd hear at a graduation speech. Okay. What about the low end of the spectrum? Well, that's where the more sober estimations of human potential sit. We find understandings of the human spirit as something that veers by default in a malign direction and cannot flourish without assistance or constraint. We find descriptions of people as finite, blind, and in many cases quite weak. We find one of my favorite patron saints of low anthropology comes from your denomination, and her name is Anne Lamott, famous PC USAer. Everyone is screwed up, broken, clingy, and scared, even the people who seem to have it more or less together. Thank you, Anne. She goes on, though, to say, they are much more like you than you would believe. So try not to compare your insides to their outsides. Try not to compare your insides to their outsides. Now, Anne is not articulating a high anthropology. She's articulating a low anthropology. See, if my 3rd grader came home from school one day and told me, hey, Dad, guess what I learned? I learned that everyone is screwed up, broken, clingy, and scared. I'd be like, what? No, you're special. Now, pull up your pants. You are special. Wipe the peanut butter off your face. You are very wonderful and skilled and gifted, and you are God's child. I'd be concerned. I would say, I'd pat him on the back and I'd say, no, you're fantastic. But don't think about your child when it comes to this. Think about yourself. On the one hand, Lamott's words sound a little harsh. Sure, I may be a little scared and clingy, but everyone, isn't that a little extreme? That guy, Miles, from high school sure seemed comfortable in his own skin. You know, my 3rd grader, don't be so hard on yourself. You're just going through a tough time right now. On the other hand, Steve Jobs' invitation must have inspired those graduates, wouldn't you think? How fortunate they were to walk away with the knowledge that they already possessed everything they needed to become the next enslaver of the entire human race. I'm in Dell country, right? Can I take shots at Steve? Yeah, that's what he did. A high anthropology views people as defined by their best days and greatest achievements, their dreams and aspirations. A low anthropology assumes a through line of heartache and self-doubt, that the bulk of our mental energy is focused on subjects that would be embarrassing or even shameful if broadcast, and that our ability to do the right thing in any given situation is hampered by all sorts of unseen factors. For example, say you had a tough week. Say you didn't get much sleep over the weekend, and you started out crabby. Then you got a really annoying phone call from your sister, doing that thing that she always does and driving you crazy. And that afternoon, you snapped at your son, and you were mean to your husband. And then you went to get the groceries, and you were distracted and irritated and you got into a little fender bender, right? All of a sudden, you might feel recognized by Anne Lamott's words. You might feel seen by them and sympathized with. Rather than you might find Steve Jobs' exhortation a little burdensome. After all, you don't always like what you've become or where your intuitions have steered you. Where's my courage? Where's my good intuition? It went to Harvard. I'm just kidding. Lamott's admission, it conveys compassion. You can feel your shoulders unknot. Steve Jobs' advice, not so much. His words convey pressure. And this is the great irony of a low anthropology. What sounds insulting is actually liberating. And what sounds liberating at first is actually oppressive and embittering. Now, isn't this supposed to be a Christian talk? I haven't mentioned the Bible. Well, if you've been paying attention, you know I've been talking about the Bible the whole time. I'm trying to outline or translate a Christian anthropology, an understanding of human beings as creatures who are finite and conflicted, broken, and capable of vicious self-interest, as human history attests, and yet not disqualified from love, somehow. It's not a Pollyanna view of human nature. It's an accurate one which allows for actual love, because no one feels loved for what they put on their resume. No one. They may feel respected, they may feel admired, they may feel rewarded for those things. But if you want to experience love, you have to begin with what people leave off their resume. That's where actual connection comes. Now, what am I talking about? We're going to watch a video in a second, but I work in Charlottesville. That's where we're based, and I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of students at the University of Virginia. And I've been doing it long enough that they're all getting married. And so I go and I listen to the speeches. I sometimes preside or perform the wedding, and I listen to these rehearsal dinner toasts. And these are the people that love the people who are about to get married. And how are they expressing that love? Yes, the father of the bride is usually gushing and a mess and very sweet. The bridesmaids say, "Oh, she's incredible, we all know that, but let me tell you what you don't know. Let me tell you what she's like on a Tuesday night in her sweatpants when we ate like 3 pints of Ben & Jerry's and watched reality TV shows. Or let me tell you what happened when she broke up with so-and-so and we decided to really paint the town red. Let me tell you about the stuff I'm not supposed to tell you about, because that's where love was experienced. That's where I got to know the person." And then the groomsmen get up there. And they just insult the guy. Like they just roast him the whole time. And what they're communicating, though, when they say, "I'll tell you about a night in 1995, when the cops had to come to our house and it was really ugly, but I guess tell you what, there's no one I would have rather experienced that night with than that guy. Because I could laugh at him and I was not arrested, but he was." It's like that's the sort of thing. And that's why, in University of Virginia, that's why fraternities and sororities are so important. Not that they sort of are all getting together to be happy together, but they're getting together to suffer together. That's what an initiation is. That's what, pledging. Anyway, I'm not here to defend the Greek system, but I will just say that love travels on the rails of a low anthropology. And the extent to which we edit out the unsavory parts of our humanity, we are editing out love. And God, I'm convinced, is interested in the real person. Jesus is interested in the real person. He is interested in the heart. He's interested in the motivation. He's interested in what's behind the veil. And that's where actual love is to be found. That's where grace is to be experienced, not when you're at your best, but when you are at your worst. And you were loved anyway. That's what it looks like. Now, I'm going to show you a video now that I describe in the opening chapter, the introduction it's called. This is from this School of Life. Do you guys know what the School of Life is? It's a London-based institution that's trying to kind of educate people who didn't grow up with any religion and trying to teach them skills of life that were not covered in school. And they produced one video called How to Get Married. How to Get Married. And the aim was to update the traditional marriage service for a post-religious crowd without devolving into sentimentality. And the results were by design both profound and hilarious. So let's see if we can...
Things kick off with what's called the ritual of humility.
Humility is probably the most important emotion for the success of a relationship. Humility starts with an ample, accurate, and sorrowful recognition of all one's failings. It is filled with apology and modesty. It doesn't pretend that flaws are charming quirks or excusable oddities. It contains an open admission that we wish we were different and better. Simon, do you admit that you're a failed, broken human being? Not in every way, but in some ways so serious that you will at points be a grave burden to Emily.
Yes, I admit I am failed and broken.
Before coming here today, freely and openly and after careful reflection, you have listed your failings as you recognize them. You've listed them in this book. This is your book of imperfections. Would you now, before me, your partner and your guest, read some of what you have stated in your own words?
I acknowledge that I'm not good at communicating my feelings maturely. I won't say what's bothering me, but instead sulk and expect you to read my mind and get furious at you when you can't. I can be quite self-involved. I tend to assume that if you're upset, it's something about me. I get jealous even over small incidents and become petty and hateful instead of showing that I'm afraid of losing you.
Both partners admit to their multiple faults. Self-righteousness is, after all, the great enemy of love.
Neither of us is fully sane or healthy. We are committed to treating each other as broken people with enormous kindness and imagination when we can manage it.
There is nothing odd about this couple beyond the ordinary oddness that is everyone's lot. They've merely put into words the errors and failings of which we are all continuously guilty.
We are all broken. We have all been idiots and will be idiots again. We are all difficult to live with. We sulk and get angry. Blame others for our own mistakes. Have strange obsessions and fail to compromise. We are here to make less lonely feelings. We'll never know all the details, but we understand.
All right. That's a low anthropology wedding service. And what is so funny, I mean, I've shown that clip many, many times, and it never fails to elicit some laughs. And usually the older the crowd, the more laughter there is, thank God. But it's not pure comedy. There is an idea here, and it's actually implicit in the Christian wedding service, where we are not vowing to fix each other or improve one another. We're vowing to love one another. And we are vowing to stick with each other in sorrow and sickness and confusion, rather than only in the mountaintop moments. Because a Christian marriage understands that the foundation of marriage is how God loves us, which is with grace. And at the point of what they talk about there, the point of imperfection, rather than the point of perfection. Some might say that this service is clever, but a little dour. I mean, isn't your wedding day supposed to be a day of aspiration and beauty? an occasion to lift up love and charity, to celebrate your spouse-to-be rather than talk about your abiding idiocy. We have every other day of the year to court cynicism, allow us this one fairy tale moment. But I've noticed when people watch this, they usually find the honesty, well, after you get used to the fact that they're intentionally making us laugh by this sort of candor in a solemn context, the honesty is refreshing and even cheerful. You see a picture of two people coming together in full view of their flaws, and as a result, the connection exudes hope, not dismay. What does he say? What's the key line in there? Self-righteousness is, after all, the great enemy of love. Now, Alain de Botton, who was the writer who had written that and was narrating it, I mean, that is taken straight from the New Testament. Self-righteous, not straight, but the principle is taken straight from Jesus was on the warpath against self-righteousness. He could abide any amount of sin and failure. What he could not abide was self-righteousness. Those are the people he conflicted with. Those are the people he argued with. Those are the people that nailed him to a cross. And of course, we all have some degree of self-righteousness in us, and we all know that it's the great stumbling block to love. I'm giving this talk after Lent has just begun. And Lent, the Lenten season, today we lift it up as maybe sort of an extended memento mori, meaning like a time to confront yourself with reminders of your death. And that's part of what it is. That's part of what Ash Wednesday is, at least in my tradition. But it's also a season of repentance. It's meant to say, not only am I going to die, but on some level that I can't really even understand, death is connected to sin. I deserve to die. I fall under the same verdict of God's wrath against sin. I fall under that. I'm just like you. And yet on Ash Wednesday, at least in my church, we do the sign of the cross, which is to say, even though you do, you also fall under the banner of Jesus Christ, who does for you what you cannot do for yourself. So it's a season of repentance, and a season of repentance is nothing but a season of radical honesty and radical humility. You see, humility is always it's the first fruit of a low anthropology. And as Flannery O'Connor once said, it is conspicuously absent from any national characteristic. Not just in America, any nation is not known as that one really humble nation. It just doesn't happen. We need to learn humility. And sometimes life can feel like one long lesson in humility that we don't want to learn. But remember, self-righteousness is the great enemy of love. Now, I'll close just by saying that we are living in a time marked by deep division and acrimony. You all know this. People from different backgrounds and ideologies have never had a harder time talking to or listening to one another, and the result is a fraying social fabric that infects our day-to-day with the worst kind of tribalism. There's such an absence of humility that it's just, you can choke on it. You cannot turn on the TV or peruse a news website without breathing in some of the toxicity. Much of our despair, as well as our antagonisms, I'm convinced is fueled by a superficial view of human nature. This near default view, this high anthropology, flatters us with fantasies about our capacities and motivations, but fails to account for the actual data of our lives, leaving us lonelier and more burned out as a result. I hear from so many people who feel burdened by the pressure to perform an ideal version of themselves all the time. I feel it myself. I might be doing it right now. But the chief cultural, emotional conditions that inform this book, this Lenten reflection, were burnout and loneliness. We were burned out because we were doing more than could ever be expected of us, and yet is. And it's not just healthcare workers. It's everyone feels burned out, just like everyone feels like an imposter. We are living with a false notion of our limitations or lack thereof. And loneliness is often fueled by the fear of ever disclosing who you really are. and the extent to which there's an intolerance of weakness, there will be a lack of connection in the world. And that's what this book's contention is. That by editing out the less savory stuff about our humanity, we also snuff out solidarity, empathy, vulnerability, and yes, love. Humor too. All of a sudden we think we are the only ones with problems, the only one barely hanging on, the only one who doesn't belong. But thank God the truth of who we are is far more comprehensive than that. That's not the version of humanity we find in the scriptures. Low anthropology is my attempt to cut through this noise with hope, highlighting the counterintuitive truth that weakness and limitation can function as a doorway to compassion, unity, grace, and faith. I'm convinced that if you want to see an increase in hope, understanding, and unity amidst the engulfing mercilessness of today, indeed, if you want to communicate anything approaching the grace of God, you must begin with a low anthropology. Not coincidentally, I've also found that religion in general and Christianity in particular makes very little sense in the context of a high anthropology. Jesus came not for those who are well, but for those who are sick. Not for the righteous, but sinners. He makes it as clear as he possibly can. Now let's go to the last slide. This is Brian Stevenson, maybe as a young Brian Stevenson. I don't know if you've read the book Just Mercy. It's a wonderful book. That's him on the right, he's bearded there. And he's standing with, I think that's Walter McMillian, who he got in his conviction for murder overturned in 1993. It was a big moment for Brian Stevenson. Now, he's devoted his life since then to advocating for inmates on death row. And Just Mercy is a book about that. These are men that he's speaking on behalf of who have been convicted of heinous and violent crimes. They occupy the lowest rung on the social ladder and are seldom the recipients of sympathy or interest from the outside world. Well, in that wonderful book, at the very beginning, Brian answers the rhetorical question, how does he keep going year after year when the cards seem so stacked against him and his clients? He doesn't say, because I believe in the dignity of every human being. He doesn't say that. He might believe that. I don't know. What he says is, I do what I do because I'm broken too. We are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone and have been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. I desperately wanted for mercy for a client, but I couldn't pretend that his struggle was disconnected from my own. Our shared weakness connected us. Our brokenness is the source of our common humanity, the basis for our shared search for comfort, meaning, and healing. Our shared vulnerability and imperfection nurtures and sustains our capacity for compassion. So that's what this book is about. That's the invitation that I think we're all given by the church calendar or simply by our faith during this time of the year, but any time of year. Any liturgy worth its salt will have some kind of confession in it. And that's why I think it's important, and that's why I hope you'll join me tomorrow, because we're going to talk exactly how it functions. Because low anthropology is not a euphemism for sin. It includes that. But we're also going to talk about doubleness. We're going to talk about limitation. We're going to talk about vulnerability. We're going to talk about what it means to be human so that we might understand better who this God is, who we crucified and then rose again so that we might put Easter lilies on our tables. Thank you for listening.
Now it's on? Now it's on. Great. I don't have a question, but I'm going to invite other people to have who have questions to come and ask them, and we'll take a few minutes. Does that work? Okay,
Certainly.
Great. So if you could come and ask your questions here, that'd be great.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. Quick question for you. Is the popularity of the prosperity gospel high anthropology? Is the type of ministry and sermon you see with like Joel Osteen, put your best life forward, that sort of ministry, is that high anthropology in your opinion? Is that putting too much emphasis on being happy and being well as a Christian?
That's a great question, because the prosperity gospel is enormously popular, and it's really an outgrowth of a certain type of Pentecostal Christianity, which I think begins from a low anthropology, because any kind of Christianity begins from a shared need for God. And I think that this is a kind of a controversial thing to say, but I think the prosperity gospel is often understood best from different social locations. If you're a person who grew up working, who basically was given a whole heck of a lot, and then you were told, well, God will actually love you if you do even more, if you get your fingernails to the bone, that can be an absolutely crazy-making, neurotic project. If you were brought up, though, being told you were worthless, and that no one cared about you, and that you didn't have anything worth contributing to, the idea behind the prosperity gospel is that God actually cares about you and wants good for you, and God is real and wants to bless you in certain ways. You experience that not as this neurotic burden of perfectionism. I think you experience that as a word of hope that something good might actually come of my life. I think it's very, very easy to manipulate and to use that as a form of, that turns into high anthropology. Mm-hmm. Any kind of God helps those who help themselves scheme, which is a Benjamin, it's Franklin quote, not the Bible. You get into very dangerous territory, and that can become a mode of hiding and competitive righteousness that brings out the worst possible religious inclinations in people. But I don't think it's always there in the prosperity gospel. I think it's there often in celebrity culture, which gets married to the prosperity gospel in such a way that it becomes about self-aggrandizement, and that's very dangerous, as we've seen.
Thank you.
It's certainly not theology, but as you compared the commencement addresses of Mr. Jobs and the other, I couldn't help but think of a pretty famous commencement speech here given at the University of Texas by Admiral William McRaven. I don't know if you know his book, Make Your Bed.
Make Your Bed?
Yes, and that's his premise. In fact, the first of how to change the world, start off by making your bed. Find someone to help you paddle. Measure the person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers, and on. That's kind of I'd say, mid to low anthropology that's expressed in a commencement address right here.
That's good to hear. I mean, again, commencement addresses are heard by different people in different ways. I just think that when we talked about the prosperity gospel just now, it could be if you're a person who thinks you're a worm and you've been absolutely, cast aside by the society, and to hear from Steve Jobs that you might have something value to contribute might be really something you need to hear in your life. I just don't think you were then gone to Stanford University. I don't think, right? You don't get into that school without being told how great you are a lot, okay? Whether or not your older brother bullied you. You've been affirmed, within an inch of your life. And one of the things I think it's important to talk about, and when you talk about low anthropology and high anthropology, I use an example in the book taken from Lori Gottlieb, who is a psychologist, who noticed that a lot of her patients who were in their 20s were kids who were told how special they were when they were growing up, and they were sheltered from any negativity and any experience of failure. And as a result, they got out into the real world, and when they experienced small acts of rejection, failure, negativity, their whole worlds crumbled, and they thought they were the only one who was like this, that they'd been lied to, and that they were uniquely awful. This attempt to shore up self-esteem had led to the exact opposite of it. And in a sense, what she tells her patients is like, no, everyone experiences these things. Nobody is perfect. In fact, you're lucky that you got this far without experiencing this. And that is a low anthropology. And to her patients, they don't experience that as a negative evaluation. They experience it as grace, as the permission to be human. Anyone else?
I just wondered as I was listening to you, and I read a little bit of your book already, but this seems like a topic that would be well suited for adolescents as well as adults. And just wondered, is there any application that your book or your theology or this kind of concept, is it taught in schools at all, or how low on the age scale can it go?
It's a good question. I've heard that from people who've read the book. It's like, I'm going to give one to my daughter, you know. I think one of the most pernicious things about social media, and that's the world in which a lot of us live, and I'll include myself in that. And, you know, the biggest users of Facebook are all in their 70s, so it's like we're all there, okay? If you say you're not, you're probably lying. But I think that but if that's all you ever experienced was a nonstop parade of assertions of happiness and perfection, that will have a deleterious effect on a person's psychology. So I think that is why a message of low anthropology would be extremely helpful, I think, to a younger generation. Simply because you get so isolated in your sense of not enoughness because you're only experiencing the best of what everyone else, and you know that you're doing the same thing. You're not sharing pictures of yourself drooling, but that's the reality of your life. So I hope it has application for younger people as well as older people. But I don't want to exempt any of us from this. Like, this predates social media. The human tendency is always to reach. It's like it's hubris, and to think more of ourselves than we should, and the self-righteousness thing. And that's always been the case since the Garden of Eden. So I need to hear this not just during Lent. I need to hear it all the time, because, again, it's not a coincidence that the Christian liturgy follows the same path of confession and then absolution.
Thank you for coming and for everything you're doing through Mockingbird. That's been really helpful for me personally over the past couple years since John introduced me to it.
Thanks.
And I started reading your book this week, so if this is something you flesh out further and I need to keep reading, that's a perfectly fine answer. But in thinking about how a low anthropology informs the way we see ourselves and other people, I was wondering if you could share some thoughts on guardrails against like self-loathing for yourself, and then for thinking about how it informs your view of other people, like holding folks accountable for things, because I think there would be a tendency to, oh, we're all screwed up, I can't have any expectations for myself or other people, and how to walk that line.
Sure. I think self-loathing is usually the product of feeling like you're the only person who's bad. The line that I think is important in the beginning of the book is that it's not shame-inducing or defeatist to say, I cannot do it all, be it all, know it all, care about it all. It's shame-inducing and defeating to say, I can, I just haven't pulled it off yet, like so-and-so. That's where real self-loathing comes into play. And a low anthropology does not in any way deny that God has given each of us enormous gifts, and that the exercising of those gifts is what makes the world such a beautiful place. It merely puts, instead of approaching the world resentful, for it not being better than it is. You approach the world grateful that it is full as much beauty, truth, and goodness as we see. The fact that the hand of God is so abundantly apparent in so many places is the reason to get up in the morning. What's not a reason to get up is to put my faith in human ability to improve and to treat each other through grit better. So I think it's a low anthropology is a doorway to awe and wonder. What does it mean in terms of holding people accountable? I don't think a low anthropology is not meant to justify other people's bad behavior, but it certainly can help explain it. And if you can waste a little less time baffled by the fact that other people are just as screwed up, broken, clingy as you are, well, then you might have a little energy left over to address the wrongs that you've done and they've done, and to serve your neighbor and try to make it all a little lighter, rather than banging your head against the wall or just hating people for not conforming to your version of reality.
Thanks.
Maybe one more. Yes.
We're relatively new to covenant. We came because we heard great preaching. We love this pastor. You just have to love it. The lead pastor especially, because that low anthropology is coming through all the time with him. I mean, he has a way of just being human. And when we see it, we see ourselves. And it's a wonderful thing to be part of that.
Isn't that amazing? That's the truth. That's it. But beautiful to hear. Well, thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9. Yeah? Thanks, everyone. I'm happy to sign a book or two if you want me to, or we can do that tomorrow.
We'll do that tomorrow.
Okay.
On your way out, there should be some magazines, some Mockingbird magazines in the back, the surprise issue. Please take one. I think we should have enough for folks who are here. Maybe just take one per household tonight. And then we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. Please come hungry.